boy, how to get used to a lot of this. It's funny, whenever I was younger and I would get manic, like I wouldn't recognize it. I guess it was something that I wasn't aware of, or maybe just didn't want to be aware of. I think that's one of the biggest things about bipolar disorder that gets interesting as you get older is being able to recognize when it isn't affecting you. It's just this experience that you just like otherwise don't get. It's hard to explain. It's hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it. Where it's almost like your brain analyzes itself and says, oh, well, this thing that you're thinking about, this thing you're upset about, this thing you're excited about is outsized to you. Like, this isn't as big of a deal as you think it is. And what makes a lot of that so difficult is that, you know, if I get upset about something, making a bigger deal of it than it should be, maybe feeling like it's a bigger deal than it actually is. I also feel the confidence to handle it in whatever way I want, and feel like, you know, whatever I do, there won't be the repercussions that there actually will be. Because that feeling of so-and-so looked at me funny at work, somebody said something that pissed me off, I can leave, I don't need this, I can just walk off and it's fine, I'll be able to manage everything. In reality, that's probably not a good idea. It takes this like weird, constant level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence that takes up a lot of time and energy. I feel like that's one of the things people don't talk about with recovering or living with mental illness is it's not just, you know, walking yourself down from trying to kill yourself or getting away from addiction or alcoholism. It's the after part of what do I do with like regular human emotions? How do I recognize them? How do I constantly keep track of myself for the potentially rest of forever and making sure that I'm not doing anything stupid, making sure that I'm not shooting myself in the foot constantly. It's a lot of fun, and it's one of those things that I don't think they really even prep you for in therapy or, you know, like in group settings or post-hospital settings. You know, it's always like, well, you got to stay on your meds, you got to do this and that, you got to see your therapist, you got to do some of these things, you know, that are going to be these drastic changes, but nobody ever mentions like also for the rest of your life, you're going to have to basically monitor everything you think, do, and say to see if they're valid or legitimate in terms of what your emotional response is. And I know that's just part of like being an adult. But that's something that at least theoretically every adult should be doing. Is, you know, kind of keeping themselves in check just a little bit, you know, like just a little bit of, am I being irrational? Am I being bombastic with my language? Am I being hurtful to people? I guess growing up with and growing into and living with mental illness, so it feels different because there's so much of my younger life where it's just do whatever the fuck you want and nothing can hurt you. You're magically strong, and that dawning that you're not, that I'm not, that maybe I'm not as great as I think I am at that. I feel like every time I start a new art project, it feels a lot like I'm like trying to date a new person. And I get really, really, really excited about it and like start jumping the gun on a ton of things and get like really impatient and then get really disappointed when of course it doesn't stand up to the like insane ideals that I've like built up in my mind of like, oh, this is going to be the greatest thing ever, and like I'm immediately going to feel so great for doing this. And I think that's just, man, me in a nutshell. Like, I have no patience. I have zero. I always feel like I'm like running out of time, and like if anything's not like immediate, then it's like, well, not worth doing. Which is probably why I've been single for so long. It's weird how now that I'm older and I'm like more used to the mood swings and stuff like that, like the kind of polar aspect of things, like it almost feels like they've like toned down, maybe like just gotten softer. And I don't know if that's like an age thing or if it's just that like now I anticipate it a little better, like it doesn't catch me by surprise as much. And I think a big part of it too is that I quit drinking. That's a big chunk of it. I was thinking about like trying to find a way to visually represent what, like mania? Because I think a lot of times like in media it gets portrayed as just, oh come on you stupid fucks. And I've kind of been thinking about like a way to like explain something like that, like the sort of behind the scenes of that, like how quickly the thoughts go and how great everything seems, you know, like the expectation versus the reality of the thing. Where it's like you do something, you make something, you kind of half-heartedly do it. The reality of the thing is that you clearly haven't put that much work into it, that much effort into it, but you're still very excited about it. It's so half done, so half baked, so just incomplete, and so sometimes so odd and so disjointed, you know, that there will be things that I've made in the past and things that I've worked on in the past that I've made a lot of logical leaps, you know, a lot of the thought process ends up getting left out of the end result. I feel like maybe a good way to show this is if in the middle of talking about this, I periodically just blacked out certain chunks. Like if you were to, you know, see the scenery going by on the street, and maybe just every so often like a block just disappears. And you still get to the same place, but it doesn't make sense anymore. The other thing that's wild about it is that you feel so sure that everyone will get your leaps. I think the other thing that's like hard to explain to people is that someone in my position who's dealt with bipolar disorder for as long as I have learned basically over time to temper the excitement. Like, I mean, even as I'm talking about it now, fairly straightforward. I'm not, you know, yelling, I'm not talking too fast. I should just do all these wild, nutty things. Then I'll quit my job and everything's going to work out just fine. There's no doubt in my mind that everything's great. You know, when in reality, I don't need to do any of that.